Welcome to the regular meeting of OneShoreline for June 22nd, 2026. Could I have a roll call, please?
Yes, Vice Chair Gaucher,
Here.
Director Chuang,
Present.
Director Eakin,
Here.
and we have Director Colson and Director Mueller absent today, and Director Reck should be coming shortly. So we have 4 directors present. Oh, and Chair Reck.
Yes. Moving on to item 2, public comment, and persons wishing to address the board on OneShoreline related matters not on this agenda, as well as items listed under action to approve the consent agenda, may speak for up to 2 minutes. Comments on agenda items shall be heard during that item for up to 2 minutes. So do we have anyone in the audience that would like to address the board? Anyone online?
Would anybody online like to raise their hand on Zoom and make a public comment on items not related to the agenda? I don't have any raised hand, Chair.
Okay. Moving to item 3, action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda. Only one item, approve the minutes of the May 18th, 2026 OneShoreline board meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We're moving on to 4, regular business. Item 4A is for fiscal year 2026-27, approve a OneShoreline work plan for its 2024 Measure K grant from the San Mateo County.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to introduce a new person at the table today, and that is Brian Pettit. Brian is the county attorney's office, and he has a great track record of working on the kinds of issues that OneShoreline deals with in terms of water and land rights and CEQA. And Brian Coolidge introduced Brian Pettit and I on a Zoom call a few weeks ago. And Brian, as Brian Coolidge has been promoted, Brian Pettit will take over kind of the day-to-day legal questions and issues that come up for OneShoreline. I think Brian Coolidge will still be in the mix on some level, but wanted to introduce Brian to the other Brian to our board member. And I don't know, do you want to add anything?
That was great. Thank you for the introduction. I've been with the county attorney's office for about 1.5 years. Spent 10 years with the county of Santa Barbara, before that advising the flood control district down there. So appreciate the kind words, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to go to item 4A, which is the FY 26-27 work plan and budgets. Budgets meaning operational budget, flood zones budget, and capital projects budget. We went into this in some level of detail last month, in part because we knew that this month's agenda was going to be substantial, which it is. And so I wanted to go through this quickly, but or just, I would say, more quickly than maybe normally would in June, partly because of the deep dive we did 4 weeks ago. So with that, an overview slide, taking a look at the budget, the revenue. Specifically, this is a snapshot of the sources of revenue that we have at OneShoreline. The total revenue, including flood zones, projects, grants, is $14.4 million next year, FY 26-27. Most of it is tied to a specific geography or a specific project. So it's not kind of general countywide money that we can assign to different places. As you can see, the Coleman Creek flood zone is kind of dominant in terms of our income. But we have income from other sources, of course. And if we take a kind of a deeper dive into the operating revenue of 2.86 million, a good portion of that is from state and federal grants that we've received in recent, mostly last year, and that we're still negotiating some of them. We have a county Measure K grant, which is a 3-year grant, $750,000 per year for 3 years, and next year is year 2 of that grant. And then city contributions, which our assumption is for the next fiscal year is about $300,000. So the Measure K grant, We talked about this work plan being a Measure K grant work plan. It is really specific to that work plan, but of course it provides an overview of a lot of the activities that we do because we've wrapped into the Measure K work plan and grant most of our work. We talked about the work plan last month at the board meeting. A few days, well, about a week and a half after that board meeting, we met with county department heads and went over the items in our work plan and had a good, robust meeting with them. And it didn't really change what we showed last month. And so what we showed today and what was in the board packet is pretty similar to what was discussed at the May board meeting. But the Measure K work plan is a relatively small piece of the overall funding pie. It's about 5% of our $14.4 million. But it is really important money for our operating funds because it provides us the flexibility to work countywide, unlike the Coleman Creek zone or the San Bruno zone or the San Francisco zone that are all geographically based, and some of our state grants, which are focused on specific areas as well. Okay, so to the work plan, as you might recall from last month, we have really 4 task areas. Task 4 and 5 are bundled. Task 1 is related to land use planning. And the broad categories are support in land use documentation by local governments, infrastructure guidance, and we're working on the public infrastructure guidance that we've talked about. That's going to be coming out at the end of September. And as a public draft, and we'll talk about that more with the board as we get closer to the end of September. We have our pilot project on insurability, looking at 1 to 2 pilot projects around San Mateo County in the next fiscal year, and then also participating in the local hazard mitigation plan. So that's task 1. If there's any questions, feel free to interrupt. Task 2 is advancing multi-jurisdictional projects. So that in that category are the shoreline adaptation plans that we'll be doing for Brisbane. We'll be talking about that quite a bit at today's board meeting, as well as the 5 southern Bayside cities in San Mateo County, San Carlos, Belmont, Redwood City, Menlo Park, and East Palo Alto. So that, which we've talked about, it's funded by the state and soon to be funded by the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority. That's those projects. And then the Millbrae-Burlingame Shoreline Resilience Project is a key element of this task 2. We intend to come out with the public draft EIR by Labor Day, and we'll be talking about that at the August board meeting, and then the final EIR around the end of this year. And then working with cities on coordination regarding other shoreline plans that are not led by OneShoreline, and then work on the Pacific Coast side in terms of around the Pillar Point Harbor and Half Moon Bay, and we've talked a little bit about the federal work in that area. Task 3 is related to current disasters and the flood early warning system, coordination on the flood early warning system. The distinction there is expansion of the actual infrastructure is one item. The second item is making sure that the results of that infrastructure reach the people that they need to reach. And then maintenance of creeks through our Bayside Creeks project and permitting, and then the Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel project. And then the final bundling of 2 tasks, 4 and 5, is related to kind of general support for the county and other jurisdictions in terms of funding and in terms of identifying new projects and also drought resilience, which hopefully we'll have more to say about that over the course of next fiscal year. So that is actually the summary of the work plan that we talked about last month. And we're seeking board approval of the work plan, which is really in the form that's in the board packet, but what was in the slides today reflects everything that was in the packet. So the county, the Measure K grant has a requirement that the board adopt the work plan for the Measure K grant. So that would be the first piece of board action.
Any clarifying questions from directors? Anybody in the audience? Anybody online?
Members of the public online, if you would like to make a public comment on the work plan, please raise your hand soon. And please raise your hand.
Okay, any further comment?
No
They
comment.
have a roll call, please.
Oh,
You do have a comment, okay.
no, I was gonna say, have we moved approval? Have we taken
Oh,
it?
that's right. We need a motion in a second. I'm in a hurry.
I was like, I missed it. I move approval of adopting the Measure K grant work plan.
Second. Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Boucher,
Yes.
Director Pom,
Yes.
Director Aiken,
Yes.
and Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 4B is to authorize the CEO to execute a 3-year agreement beginning July 1. for a
Well,
non-
we're still, sorry, we're still on the
With
budgets. We're still on the budgets for
Okay.
4A.
Okay,
Because
right.
I'll need the board to approve the budgets, the FY 26-27.
Okay, that's right. So the operating budget, the flood zone budget, and the capital projects budget, do we need separate motions for each of those?
So I have some things to go through,
Okay.
and I don't think we need separate motions for the 3 budgets.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so up on the screen is a version of what we saw last month. The high level on this is that we have, with the current commitments, funding commitments, even with the vagaries of city contributions, we have funding to go to sustain the operations through the 29-30 fiscal year. It's good. If you remember, our original 3 years of funding from all the cities in the county was anticipated to kind of jumpstart the agency. And now with the additional money from the county, plus some additional money from the cities, plus all the grant income, we've extended that 3 years to really 11 years. And so that's good news. Of course, it's not perpetual, and which is why we're also still talking about the need for a potential ballot measure or some other vehicle to raise long-term funding for the agency. So that's the kind of long-term picture. Looking at the operating budget, these are the final numbers that are in the board packet for the budget for consideration of approval. The 2 things I'll highlight is the revenue minus expenses. We're showing about a 2% deficit. I'm not sure it will actually end up being that way because we usually are pretty conservative in our budget estimates, but it's about breaking even next year. And that will leave us with estimated reserves of about $6 million, which I'll go back one slide. That's what you see in the column for FY 26-27 reserves, $5.94 million. And that's what we see also at the bottom of our operating budget. Okay, in terms of the flood zone, oh, sorry, actually one more point. And this was something that was commented by Director Rack last month, talking about what are the costs, internal costs that are offset by other projects and the flood zones and grants. In the case of personnel costs, we have about 43% of our personnel costs offset by those categories. So what you see there is $1.6 million in personnel costs for the year. And then about $700,000 offset by those funding categories of grants, flood zone, and capital projects. So net personnel costs of $900,000. In terms of operations and support costs, it's $2.1 million, and that's offset by $150,000. That's a little bit misleading because of the $2.1 million, about $1.6 million is project related. A lot of our operating money goes towards projects. It's just not capital projects because it doesn't result in assets that we own. So that leaves about $500,000 in true operating costs, meaning keeping the lights on. And of that, about $150,000 is offset, or about 30% of those costs are offset. So just to give the board a sense of, we talked about this last month and what that looks like from our perspective. In terms of the flood zone budgets, nothing has changed since May except the San Francisco line, or column, I should say. And the change is that the expenses are reduced from last time. The San Francisco JPA, Joint Powers Authority, of which we're one of 5 members, Director Gaucher sits on the board of the JPA. Thank you for that service. The JPA's estimate of its annual budget expenses was reduced since mid-May. And so that's reflected in this budget that we're proposing. The board of the JPA, as I understand it, is going to take up the budget at its meeting next Thursday, and it might actually be further reduced, which could be good news for us, especially us, meaning OneShoreline, because we have a discrete amount of money that really is coming from property taxes in the more that we give away every year. For good cause, the more that we give away leaves less for us to contribute towards other project work. So that's one piece of the San Francisco Creek budget that's changed. The other piece is we're actually going to we're planning in the budget to spend about $50,000 to expand our flood supplies program that we initiated in San Bruno this past year. And what that means is it's a program where we reimbursed homeowners for purchasing flood supplies for their homes. And in this case, it would be for the city of East Palo Alto residents. And so this was a pretty successful pilot project we did in San Bruno with flood zone money this past year. And we were talking about where we might be able to expand that effort. And we're putting forward in this budget doing that in East Palo Alto and working with local nonprofits in the city to get the word out about this. And we can talk some more about that. I think you'd be interested in that, Director Gaucher. So that's the flood zone budget. Otherwise, the numbers are really what we saw last month for Cold Creek and San Bruno Creek. Okay, in terms of capital budgets, what's on the slide is slightly revised from the packet. I want to point that out, the board packet that came out on Thursday. And that is in the number of $175,000. And this is important because when the board approves the capital project budget, I propose that they be approved with this change. The $175,000 is a contribution from the city of Burlingame that was put into their budget recently. It's within the past few weeks. And that is to bring the Millbrae and Burlingame Shoreline Resilience Project draft EIR to a final EIR. And we plan to put out the draft EIR around Labor Day, as I mentioned, and we would really like to have the funding to bring that to a final EIR and close out that chapter of the project. We went to the city of Burlingame, and thanks to Donna Colson and Mayor Michael Brownrigg, they got the city to make that commitment for the next fiscal year. So with that, the revenue from the state is reduced, and the total revenue is still at $889,000 for that project, and that matches expenses. The other thing that I'll point out about our capital projects budget, which is for 4 projects, Bayfront Canal, Millbrae, Burlingame, the flood early warning system, the Brisbane Living Shoreline project that we'll talk about later in this board meeting. Those are the 4 projects where we have or intend to create assets that we control. That's what defines a capital project for us. What I want to point out is the Bayfront Canal Atherton Channel project is almost out of money after many years. It has, at the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate it'll have less than $1,000 left. And what that means is we still have to maintain that project. We still have to monitor it. We still have to report on it for the permitting agencies, for the wildlife and resource agencies. So what that means is over the next 6 months, we'll be developing a new funding agreement, just as we did in 2020 for this project. That will include the city of Redwood City, the city of Menlo Park, and San Mateo County, and OneShoreline. And that will be not nearly as much as the last funding agreement, which was about $10 million. This funding agreement will just be to do the maintenance and the reporting and other requirements of our permits. So that will be, we don't know the amount, but it will be probably for about 5 years of activity, something like that. Does that sound about right? Okay, so that's on Bayfront Canal.
Do you know, I'm
Yeah,
sorry, Lynn,
yeah,
do you know when you're gonna have the funding lined up for this project? It's 5 years, but when will you have an idea of what that's gonna cost each agency?
Yeah, so that funding agreement would start July 1 of the next fiscal year.
Okay.
Right, so we won't surprise any agency by having a mid-year requirement. It would start July 1, so it would be programmed into the budgets of the other agencies. In terms of the cost, I think it would be something in the range of $500,000 among the two cities and the county.
Okay.
Something like that, right? I mean, we haven't really dived into the
We're
numbers.
still
but
working on it.
I would suspect that's for a ballpark for the whole agreement, for a 5-year agreement, it would be something along those lines. Yeah. The previous agreement was to fund construction, so that's why it was a $10 million project. And we knew when we created that agreement in 2020 that we wanted it to fund not just construction, but also the first few years of maintenance and regulatory reporting and all, which it did successfully. And so now it's time to, now that we have a few years of that under our belt, so to speak, it's time to come up with a new estimate and go out to the jurisdictions.
Thank you.
We intend to have that signed by early spring, again, to start July 1 of 2027, that funding agreement. In terms of Millbury Burlingame, after the funding that you see here on the slide, that would expire the funding, and that has come from the state of California through a Kevin Mullen generated earmark through the State Coastal Conservancy, except for the 175 that's being contributed by the city. That the state grant has put in between $3.5 and $4 million. And now with the completion of the final EIR and design and some work on permitting, some of the design, I should say, not completed design, we will have completed the funding for that. Also, money has come from FEMA. $300,000 of the cost of this project came from FEMA. And we will be on the hunt for new money for that project to continue it in terms of completing design, completing permitting, and then getting to construction. But in terms of flood early warning system, that project is always out of money, and OneShoreline backstops it with our Measure K grant, which is something we're very happy to do. For the most part, but we want to find a new grant for it. We did have a state grant that is wrapped up, and we need another infusion of money for that. So that will be one of our top priorities for grant seeking. I'm looking at Stephanie because she's our great grant seeker, so just highlighting the fact that project is out of money. And so, yeah, with that concludes the presentation on budgets. And so what we're seeking is board approval of the 3 budgets, including the capital projects budget as it's reflected on the slide. And we'll make the adjustment on the documentation for the final approved budgets.
Questions on the budgets? Yes, so on the Bayfront Canal, so why is Atherton not one of the contributors, or did I miss that?
No, you did not miss that. Atherton was a contributor to the construction funding agreement in 2020. That was negotiated in 2020. And they put up $1.1 million, I believe. And the stipulation at that time that was bought into by everybody in the agreement was that was their one and final contribution to the project. Obviously, that can change. That was 5 years ago that the agreement was signed. But the working assumption that we have is that agreement is kind of how it's going to play out.
Did they in fact pay the 1.1 million, if you know?
They did. It was a slightly complex fiscal arrangement with the county that I think Brian Coolidge is best to describe what that looked like. It involved a leaseback arrangement between the city and the county that maybe you're familiar with, Brian, but this was an arrangement that was negotiated between the county and Atherton to enable Atherton to have the cash to participate in the project.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought. And then the city of Redwood City does maintain Bayfront Canal, is
They
that
do.
correct?
They do on behalf of the partners and OneShore, because we own the asset, but the city maintains it. And in theory, that maintenance is funded by the funding agreement we're talking about.
Okay, and then I may or may not have another question quickly. Oh, just on the SFCJPA that we are spending less than we thought we would and might maybe even spending even less. Is that because, I mean, it sounds like good news, but is it really bad news because they're not getting as much work done as they had planned to, and that's why there's less costs?
I don't know if that's bad news though, but yeah, I know I stepped on your toes there.
No,
because I'm on the board.
No, please,
So-
please.
So yeah, part of it is that first of all, the agency realizes that many agencies, cities, due to DLF funds, they kind of pulled back and didn't want to cause any more harm to cities. So we looked at it and they decided not to do a lot of the work to try to be helpful. And as a board, we talked about potentially giving refunds, and I was like, does that make sense to give refunds if we're gonna turn around and ask for the money back? So we're trying to give each agency in that group a little breathing room. We are gonna meet this week to talk more about the plan. They're not as advanced in their work plan as we probably should be, but there's still a lot of conversations about it. So
Okay,
the budget will be a big thing this week.
okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
I know that was convoluted, but.
No, it wasn't convoluted. It makes sense.
There are a few options that are being presented to the board that range from the numbers reflected here to essentially going down to zero in terms of contribution. And the JPA board will kind of take that up and I guess decide on Thursday the plan forward. I just felt, given that it's still a fluid conversation in the budget for our purposes, for this budget, we wanted to put the highest possible number that we're aware of. And rather than come back to the board in a couple months and ask for an amendment, just because the final decision's made at the JPA.
Thank you, Chair. Those are my questions.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Oh, yes, through the chair. I just wanted to ask a question about the projected deficit for this year. Are we projecting a deficit beyond just this year, or is it just for this budget cycle? The 66,000?
You mean a structural deficit?
Yes, there was a 66
I mean, I guess.
revenue because of,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess what we would say is, yes, we're projecting, if you look at the number for the total revenue, the 2.863 for this fiscal year, FY 26-27. Yeah, thank you. I can actually do that too. And sorry. And then you look at the revenue of 2.863 and the expenses of 2.9. So that's the 66,000 we're talking about. And then if you play that out for the next year, yes, the deficit grows substantially, the deficit, grows. So what this is trying to say is, if we did not bring in one additional dollar beyond what we're expecting in this scenario, then yes, our deficits would increase dramatically. And we would essentially run out of money on it says here on the bottom, on January 31, 2031. That's not our intention, as we talked about. We want to raise more money. We think we're competitive for grants, that has been borne out. We're also hearing from the cities about VLF in terms of the $300,000 assumption. That's shown here for the next 2 years. I don't know what that's going to be. It might be less. We hope it's not, but even if it is less, that's why I said I think we can certainly make it through the FY 29-30 fiscal year. Yeah.
And can you remind us of our reserve policy? I know we're gonna be running out, but is there a policy where we try to stay to a certain amount, or?
We don't, and I know the JPA, that's a big part of the conversation. We haven't instituted a policy. We're newer, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't. We could certainly do that. Basically what I've tried to do, and the board has supported this, is let's build up this reserve as much as we can because of the uncertainties. And so, the one of the reasons that we've been able to build up a reserve from that initial 3 years of contributions by the cities and the county is that we spent less in the first few years than what was assumed. And a lot of that is credit to Lucy and her work on managing this budget, really. And we didn't hire as much. I mean, right now, we've hired 2 new people in the last 3 months. And we've done that because we're ramping up these projects and we need to do that. But I hope it's been communicated effectively that we've tried to kind of manage that as much as possible and improving expenses. But we could look at doing a policy.
Thank you. And then lastly, my question is on the early flood warning
Mhm.
program. How do we identify which creeks? I feel like there's so much water coming out of those mountains. How do you identify where the early warning devices will go?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly look at the history of flooding, and that's an important point, and the topography of the creeks, which ones technically lend themselves to early warning. And as we talk about this, we have to think about, we want an early warning system to give as much warning as possible, meaning have the gauges and all the infrastructure as far away upstream of the flood prone areas as possible. But we also need to capture as much of that data, and we can't have it so far upstream that all the storm drains and all the tributaries that come into a creek system aren't accounted for.
Mhm.
So we need to find that sweet spot, and that sweet spot doesn't exist on every channel. So it's complicated. I would say it's mostly driven by where does flooding occur and where there's no infrastructure in place, and where would it be most helpful to add new infrastructure. Right now, I mean, last year we added Atherton Channel. Atherton, if you drive down El Camino during any sized rainstorm, you see flooded signs on basically every block in Atherton. And there's a long history of flooding in Atherton. So the city of Atherton paid to install that gauge. Our top priority now is Pillarcitos. Pillarcitos has a gauge, but it's very close. It's basically at Highway 1, which is downstream of downtown Half Moon Bay and downstream of other areas that get flooded west of Half Moon Bay upstream. And so we want to put something as far upstream as possible. That's our top priority for expansion this year. We also think that other areas are good candidates, like Daly City has a history of flooding. And in fact, had substantial flooding a year and a half ago at Christmas Day, and we think that area would be a good also candidate.
Thank you.
I'm working on the Pillarcitos still, but I have a plan.
Through the chair. So Len, you mentioned that for Atherton, they paid for the early warning system equipment.
Yeah.
And so does that also apply to Half Moon Bay or other cities when or Daly City for that matters, if they're looking at their flooding history and would like to have the early warning? Does it come from OneShoreline for recommendations, or does it come from the city saying, we do have flooding histories and we want to, decrease that and prevent that, and trying to, be staying ahead of the game?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of a fluid arrangement. The Atherton gauge was a result of a presentation that we made to Atherton Town Council about 2 years ago, and we talked about the flood early warning system, and they identified that they would really like it, council members. And that started a process of negotiating, and Jonathan did most of that with the town public works director. And that was the first instance where we said, in order to do this, we will maintain it for you, but we need you to pay for the cost of the infrastructure. And they said, how much is that? And we said $25,000 ballpark, and they said fine. And so we cut a deal with them, and they paid us $25,000, and we installed it. That's going forward. I think generally that's the way we want to go, is have the jurisdictions pay for the infrastructure. It's not terribly expensive. It's small. I mean, it's basically this the size of that whiteboard or something. And the maintenance in the context of the entire system is not terribly onerous on an annual basis. It's a few $1,000s probably maximum. So I think going forward, that's the way we want to do the arrangements.
Thank you. And through the chair, one more question is regarding, I think last month when we were talking about the membership from the cities, one of the discussion was that not all the cities pay for the membership.
Right.
And one of the discussion, I think, was more of how can we make them realize bang for the bucks, it's really is worth a while for them to do that, not just for their own cities, but also regionally, right? You know, because many of the creeks run through several cities. Are you finding it successful, or has it still slow in coming? And is there any
I would say
way
it's
that we
challenging. Yeah,
challenging?
it's challenging. I mean, the way that we initiated this second round process was a correspondence that was signed by Director Chair Ruddock and Vice Chair Gaucher and myself, a letter to all the city managers, and the electeds were copied. And I think it requires more than that. And I had additional conversations with city managers. But it probably requires more than that to have a more robust participation.
I think it would be helpful to the extent the boards or, you know, other city elected would be able to advocate for OneShoreline. I think that will be critical.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further questions from directors?
I just have one more question. So with the weather projected, is it El Nino year
Yeah,
this year?
Super.
So, so are we anticipating, does that help with funding if we could say we're getting more rain this year, or what happens?
I think it certainly is a pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it certainly means that we want to get some things done this year. In terms of early warning, we put into the, I didn't mention it earlier, but we put into the budget a significant amount for the mobile home park project. We want to get that started. We've talked about that before. We want to get this flood supplies program in East Palo Alto, and maybe a second round in San Bruno before this winter. So I think it provides some impetus for us to do things in concert with other jurisdictions in terms of making the pitch for our funding. I think it could help. Honestly, I think BLF is a big concern at the local jurisdictions, and that's what I'm hearing is just, you know, what the impact is on their ability to fund things like the contribution to OneShoreline.
They'll pay a lot more if it floods in their cities too.
Yeah, that's right. And I just saw a presentation today on by the head meteorologist in LA for NOAA, NOAA National Weather Service, and there is a substantial El Nino coming. What it looks like in terms of its impact here is always a bit uncertain. But the fact of it being an El Nino it's all the scientists agree are pointing to that. So maybe what we'll do is in August or September, we'll do some sort of a presentation on that topic because people are starting to talk about it.
Sure.
Might be nice to have a presentation for the cities,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, as a way into this issue of funding too.
Yeah,
I think it would be very well attended.
that's a good idea. We could organize something.
And cities are starting to plan for the winter already too, you know, cleaning out creeks and stuff like that. So now might be a good time to think about Shoreline sponsoring
Yeah,
a
no, that's a
presentation.
really good idea.
Maybe even a council of cities dinner.
Right, and I would suggest that you reach out to the chair of the Council of Cities. Just because most of the host cities will probably have some programs already in place. So to add one more in, that sort of that is the, you know, competing for interest and time. So
Some cities don't make up their mind at the last minute.
I know,
Right.
I know, yeah. So
That's a good idea.
because I mean, the other thing is that CCAG is looking into their stormwaters, and that is another thing that they are looking at. But you know, from all accounts, the El Nino, and I kept hearing super El Nino. So it's like this is going to be a really wet season.
Yeah.
More the reasons why we need to really look into the preventative methods. So how to, or at least the early warning system, as Lisa mentioned, so.
And have recommendations as part of the presentation too, right?
Yeah.
Some value added for the cities that makes them feel good about spending money.
You might also think about the non-participating cities and just try to get 10 minutes at the beginning of those specific cities. And just appear as the expert in advance of this impending year and do those first. Just 10 minutes at the beginning.
All good suggestions.
Is there anybody online who would like to talk about the budgets?
Okay, members online, members of the public online, if you'd like to make a comment on the budget item 4A, please be looking at on Zoom. And I don't see any raised hand here.
Thank you. So we could entertain a single motion for operating, flood and capital projects.
So moved.
Second. Could I have a roll call, please?
Great, Vice Chair Gaucher,
Yes.
Chair Ruddick,
Yes,
Director Trump,
Yes.
Director Aiken,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. Item 4B, which is to authorize the CEO to execute a 3-year agreement beginning July 1 for a not to exceed amount of $230,885 with Macias, Ginny and O'Connell LLP for financial auditing services for fiscal years 25, 26, 26, 27, and 27, 28, with an option to extend the agreement to include auditing of fiscal year 28, 29 for an additional $84,235.
Great, thank you, Chair Reddick. So this item is fairly self-explanatory. Our auditor for the last several years has been MGO, which is the acronym for Macias, Ginny and O'Connell.
That's why I was confused. I was like, is this a new auditor?
Uh-huh.
I see the full name.
Yeah, exactly. But we put out an RFP at the end of March for a new auditor, and we received 2 proposals at the end of April. And MGO was one of them, and there was not another auditor. We evaluated both proposals very seriously. Lucy led that effort. And given MGO's extensive local government experience, not just with OneShoreline, but with many other local agencies in the Bay Area, including in San Mateo County, their deep knowledge of our financial operations, given our work with them over the last few years, and also their proven track record of producing audits on time and within the budget. We felt like they were, a great candidate for continuing on. And so what we're proposing is a 3-year term with an optional 1-year extension to cover the audit for this fiscal year that's just concluded, ending June 30, 2026, as well as the next 2 fiscal years. And then potentially that 1-year extension of doing FY 28-29 fiscal year. The cost is, as described on the slide, is $230,000 for the first 3 years. The optional 4th year would be $84,000. And as it was discussed in the board packet, that includes, not for this fiscal year, we already know that we don't need it, but the potential for the next 2 fiscal years to do a single audit. And that's triggered by receiving a certain amount of federal funding. Then you need to do a single audit. So we've included the cost of a single audit in case that comes to pass, the need for that. We included the money for this audit contract in our operating budget that was just approved, and for FY 26-27, and of course we would include it for subsequent years if the board approves this contract. MGO's representative and partner is in our meeting on Zoom in case there are questions of our auditor. But I think we've had really good experience with them and clean audits for the past 6 years, thanks to Lucy and the MGO team, and the finance committee meets with the auditor and reviews it once every year before it comes to the board at the end of the calendar year. And so I think this is part of our good story is the financial practices that we've been able to record and submit to the state.
Fantastic.
With that, I'll turn it back to the board.
Questions? Anybody from Finance Committee weigh in?
No, I on the finance committee or the other committee, and they have done a great job explaining things and the work that they do, so I think it makes sense to continue with this contract.
Right, anybody else? Anyone online?
Members of the public online, if you'd like to make a comment on item 4B, please raise your hand on Zoom. Those raise hand share.
Thank you. Okay, so could we have a roll call unless there's any other comments at this point? Roll call vote.
Motion.
You have to have a motion.
A motion, right.
You're ready to go.
I got another meeting to get started.
So moved.
Yeah.
Move approval.
Second, oh, you're second, okay, got it.
Okay, Vice Chair Goshen,
Yes.
Chair Reddick,
Yes,
Director Tron,
Yes.
Director Aiken,
Yes.
motion carries.
thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Item 4C, which is to adopt a resolution number 2026-06-22 to accept a $962,500 grant from the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority for the planning and design of the Brisbane Living Shoreline project.
Yes, so first of all, I'm going to provide a little roadmap of what this is all about. So the next three agenda items all relate to each other, and they relate to Brisbane Shoreline. So the revenue for these items are from the California Ocean Protection Council, a grant that the board approved a resolution to accept the grant last August, and that's $950,000. And that's to do a BCDC regional shoreline adaptation compliant plan for Brisbane. And working with the city of San Francisco, city of South San Francisco, Caltrans, because a lot of their shorelines. And of course, the city of Brisbane. The other piece of revenue is this grant that's the subject of item 4C, which is the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority grant that was approved by the Restoration Authority Board. Thank you, Director Gaucher, for your encouragement of that grant. That was approved by the Restoration Authority Board on June 12th, so just a couple weeks ago. Okay, so that's item 4C revenue. In terms of the agreements, the next agenda item is 4D, which is a master service agreement. That's what MSA stands for, Master Services Agreement, for the Brisbane Shoreline Resilience Planning. And what that means is there are really two elements of this Master Services Agreement, or MSA. One is a task order to do the BCDC compliant plan. That's what item 4E is about. And then there's a different task order that we're not seeing today, we'll see later in this year, to actually do the work of the Restoration Authority grant, which is this Living Shoreline project. Okay. So funding, one from the state, one from the Regional Restoration Authority. What that funds is a master services agreement to do all the work. Part of that work is on the BCDC compliant plan. That's task order 1. We'll see that later today in item 4E. Part of it is a task order that we'll see in 6 months, so maybe less, once we've negotiated the Restoration Authority grant. There will be other agreements within the same context of these task orders. On the Brisbane Shoreline Resilience Plan, we'll have agreements regarding community engagement and Native American consultation. In regards to the Brisbane Living Shoreline project, there will be agreements with our environmental partners, the Smithsonian, two centers affiliated with San Francisco State University, and a partner on environmental outreach. Okay, so that's the context for these items. So first is 4C, and that is accepting the grant. The grant again is $960,500. There's a local match requirement up to $77,000, and we're working with the partners to determine where that all comes from. It will certainly in part come from OneShoreline staff time. We get money from the grant to pay staff. We also provide in-kind services to the grant. It's a 3-year grant. Our partners are the City of Brisbane, other ones I mentioned, Smithsonian, the National Estuarine Research Reserve, San Francisco State's Estuary and Ocean Science Center, and the Literacy for Environmental Justice, which is a nonprofit that does engagement. Their project activities are listed here in terms of biological assessments, developing restoration strategies, CEQA documentation, draft permit applications, and engagement and construction strategies. This is all to do oyster restoration along the Brisbane shoreline, as well as develop eelgrass habitats. This is an area that was highlighted by the San Francisco Estuary Institute in their atlas as one of the prime areas, probably the prime area in San Mateo County for these activities, and one of the prime areas around the bay. So our project manager on this project, all of Brisbane, is Claire, and Summer is also spending a lot of time on this. And so they'll answer any questions, because this will tap out on where I'm at with this. But it's a great grant, and we're really excited. It's for our first Bay Restoration Authority grant, and it's a good one. We're really happy about it. So that concludes item 4C. We're looking for the board to adopt resolution 2026-0622A to accept the grant, and that resolution was included in the board packet.
Questions for Claire?
I would just say fantastic,
I know, it's
congratulations,
exciting.
really exciting.
It
It's
is.
not really a question. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome. It's so interesting to be in this meeting and then come back to this meeting, like approval and then come and approve.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is great. We were excited for this project and the funding opportunity.
Is there anyone online who would like to speak?
Members of the public, if you would like to comment on item 4C, Living Shoreline Project, please raise your hand on Zoom. And I don't see any raised hand.
Okay. Claire, would you like to make any remarks about the project?
We are very, very excited about the opportunity to have this funding as well as in concert with the state funding, and to be able to do that sort of regional planning while also looking at nature-based solutions as it's a really unique opportunity, and the balancing of funding to come in at the same time, roughly the same time, is pretty exciting. So the roadmap that Len showed us, we're going to go a little bit deeper into it. But, just to say we're very excited about this.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Does anybody have a motion there?
So move.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Gaucher,
Yes.
Chair Reddick.
Yes,
Director Trump,
Yes.
Director Aiken,
Yes,
motion carries.
thank you. Item 4D, which is to authorize the CEO to execute a 4-year master services agreement beginning July 1 for a not to exceed amount of $675,000 with Moffett Nickel for Brisbane Shoreline Resilience Planning.
Yeah, so this item was described in the roadmap as a key way to implement both the Living Shoreline Project and the Shoreline Resilience Plan. There was a process. Well, actually, first of all, so this picture that's shown in the upper right is a picture I think we're all aware of. It's driving towards San Francisco from San Mateo County on Highway 101. The bay is right there. What I thought was interesting, I think it's a picture that Jonathan took. It's actually right at that, almost exactly at that spot, what it looks like along the bay. And what you see is just a lot of erosion right there. And it's getting really close to the highway. And so the need for figuring out the resilience, not just for the city of Brisbane, but also for the highway itself, is really important. And that's why Caltrans provided a letter of support for our funding requests, and is a key part of our project team, along with the city of Brisbane and San Francisco and South San Francisco. So what this master services agreement is to kind of lead the charge for both projects, the Living Shoreline and the resilience plan. This describes kind of what we just talked about a bit, the Ocean Protection Council money, and item 4C from the Restoration Authority, the grant there. And so we did a process to secure consultant teams to lead this project with Claire and Summer, and received 5 proposals. And you all interviewed 3 teams. And the leading team, the highest ranking team, was led by a firm called Moffitt and Nickel, and with support from HD Harvey, Good City Company, Fair and Piers, and Lotus Water for all of the kind of activities that are parenthetically listed after each firm. And not to exceed amount mentioned in the agenda item, $675,000. It's broken down by each project as $476,000 for the BCDC compliant plan and just under $200,000 for the Living Shoreline project. Those numbers don't reflect that those are the entire costs of each of those projects, because as we showed in the last slide, at the bottom, there are other agreements with Smithsonian, San Francisco State, Engagement, Native American. Those costs will also be borne by these grants. But this cost for this item is really just for the consultant team associated with. So for other contracts, we'll bring those to the board later or discuss them with the board for those projects. The term of this master service agreement is 4 years, as is listed here. And the work actually would be done by just a few task orders. The next agenda item is one of those task orders. Did you add anything?
Not much of questions. Questions from directors?
I just want to say thank you. I know this is the planning portion, and then we have to find money for implementation afterwards, but it's good to get to this point and protect our highways.
And honestly, everyone used the highway,
Yes.
right? So this is why OneShoreline is important, and this is why we the cities should support it. Yeah.
Is there anyone online who would like to comment?
Members of the public, if you would like to comment on item 4D, the Brisbane Shoreline Resilience Plan and MSA, please raise your hand on Zoom. And I don't see any raised hand.
Okay, thank you. If there's no further comment, a motion would be in order. So moved.
Second,
Could I have a roll call, please?
Vice Chair Gaucher,
Yes.
Chair Ruddick,
Yes.
Director Trump,
yes.
Director Eakin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Item 4E, authorize the CEO to execute task order number 1 to the master services agreement for Brisbane Shoreline Resilience Planning.
All right, so this is now that the master service agreement is approved, the first task order under that is to do all of the activities by the consultant team for the shoreline resilience plan. So this again is a BCDC compliant plan based on its regional shoreline adaptation plan, or RSAP, that it came out with in final form in December of 2025. And December of 2024. And the elements that are prescribed by BCDC include all of the items that are bulleted there or arrowed there, from project management down to projects lists. And so this is what the consultant team will be working on for the next 2 years with us and the city of Brisbane, South San Francisco, and San Francisco and Caltrans. So, if there are questions, I'm happy to entertain.
This is for an amount not to exceed 476,000.
Right.
Can you check and see if there's anyone online who would like to address this item?
Members of the public online, if you have any comments on item 4E, task order 1 under the Brisbane Shoreline Resilience Planning MSA, please raise your hand on Zoom. And I don't see any raised hand, Chair.
Is there a motion to approve item 4E?
So moved.
Second? Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Gaucher,
Yes.
Chair Ruddick,
Yes.
Director Trump,
Yes.
Director Eakin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 4F is to adopt a resolution 2026 0622B, adopting the fiscal year 26-27 water pollution control service charges. Reports for flood zone 1 and for flood zone 2.
And
Did I miss flood zone 3?
importantly, and I'll talk about this.
Direct the CEO to negotiate and enter into any appropriate related agreements with CCAG.
Yes. So last year and maybe the year before, this was a consent item. And the history on this is in the 1990s, mid 1990s, County Flood Control District created 2 flood zones. Well, really 1 flood zone. It was a countywide flood zone to raise funds for water pollution prevention control. Pacifica decided it wanted to have its own flood zone, and so the County Flood Control District created, subsequent to that, a second flood zone, Pacifica. Those flood zones annually through the County Board of Supervisors raised funds to fund the municipal regional permit compliance. This is a permit produced or mandated by the Regional Water Quality Control Board. OneShoreline and CCAG was given the responsibility to implement the funding that was brought in by the flood zones. And CCAG does that through its stormwater program. Has done that for a long time and successfully. So OneShoreline inherited those 2 flood zones. So we don't just have flood zones in Coloma Creek, San Bruno Creek, and San Francisco Creek. We also have a countywide flood zone, which is this flood zone 1 that dates from the 90s. And we also have flood zone 2 for Pacifica. And our board assumed the work that the county flood control district board had done. And we every year just approved these rates. The documents went to the county controller and they collected the funds. But this next year will be about $2.1 million. So last year when we were doing this, the question came up, what's this all about? Our board is approving it. It's a flood zone that we own essentially. But the money never comes to OneShoreline. We don't touch it. We approve these resolutions and then we never see anything again. Yet we do work in this space on water quality, stormwater, water pollution control, etc. And that's kind of described in the last white paragraph, OneShoreline's countywide activities. And this was also in the board packet. So my feeling is that OneShoreline should be compensated for the work we do. The county controller takes its cut by administering this process. We've never seen a penny in 6 years of collecting money. These are our flood zones that we inherited, and you authorized the collection of these taxes. That it's not right for that money to just go directly to somebody else, us not have our ability to have our fingerprints on it. So my recommendation, and it's important that this money be collected, the county and the cities within it, we all have, and OneShoreline, we all have requirements under these permits. So it's not a question about should we do this, the collection of this money. We should do it. We need to do it. The question is, should OneShoreline in this era of greater austerity that we just discussed, should OneShoreline have the ability to affect and benefit from the work that we do in this space, or not? And so my recommendation is that the board approve these resolutions, which are basically identical to what we've been doing the last 6 years, these 2 resolutions that were in the packet, and that the board direct me to work with CCAG so that there's an appropriate kind of distribution of these funds that includes OneShoreline. I did talk with the acting director of CCAG last week about this. Cocky-Chung. And she's absolutely agreeable to having this conversation. And so what I would say is that I asked the board to approve these resolutions and direct me to work with CCAG, and that those conversations happen over the next month. The deadline to submit the documentation to the county controller's office so that these funds are collected over the next fiscal year is essentially the end of July. So we have about a month to figure this out. And that once we come to some sort of agreement with CCAG, we submit signed resolutions to the controller's office, and then it all moves forward. So.
Questions?
I heartily support this. I mean, when this funding was created in the 90s, OneShoreline didn't exist. And there, you know, San Mateo County's history, there are many, many examples, you know. This was 100 years ago, there were 42,000 people that lived here. You know, now there's more than, you know, a lot more, 10 times as much. And, you know, you know, the law, the rules, the contracts have to bend, or else later they break. And what's, you know, San Mateo County is the most affected by sea level rise of any county in the state. That's why this was created in the 90s, probably. But I really hope that you have robust conversations with CCAG, because we are, it's very important. So I'm glad you brought this up.
I would just say I agree. I know you were looking at me. I don't have control over the money though, but it does make sense that, you know, OneShoreline is reimbursed for the work that we're doing in this space where the county is collecting money. So I'm in full support.
Heck yeah, me too. Can you check online to see if there's comments on this item?
Members of the public online, if you'd like to make a comment on item 4F, please raise your hand on Zoom. I don't see any raised hands. Okay.
I just have a question for council. Do we need to do separate motions, or can we do one motion to adopt both resolutions?
No, if it's agendized as a single item, you just do a single
Okay.
motion for the entire.
That's great. So if there's no further comment, somebody'd like to make a motion?
So move.
Second,
Roll call, please.
Vice Chair Gaucher,
Yes.
Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Director Trump,
Yes.
Director Aiken.
yes.
Motion carries.
I don't have a chair's report for item 5. CEO's report? Nothing. Any board member reports or items for a future agenda?
I'd like to introduce you to one of my newest members of my team, Travis Dunn, who will be responsible for climate with me. So you'll be seeing him at the meeting.
And our next meeting now, the July meeting will be canceled. Our next meeting is August 24th.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's not on you though, Lynn.
No. Well, you're welcome to come.
Okay.
So this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Nice.
How was your trip, Lynn?